Have you ever prayed with all your heart, and still felt like heaven was silent? Have you ever knelt down with tears in your eyes, spoken every word you could think of, and then walked away wondering, why didn't anything change? If you have, you're not alone. Millions of people pray every single day, yet many carry the quiet frustration of unanswered prayers. But what if the issue isn't that God isn't listening? What if the issue is that we've misunderstood what prayer is really meant to be? Today, I want to challenge you with a question that could completely transform your spiritual life. That question isn't meant to condemn anyone. It isn't meant to make you feel guilty. It's meant to awaken you. Because sometimes the greatest breakthroughs begin with the willingness to examine our own hearts. Many people approach prayer like a transaction. They bring God a list of requests, hoping He will sign off on every one of them. Lord, give me this, fix that, remove this problem, bless this opportunity. Then, when the answer doesn't come immediately, disappointment begins to grow. Doubt starts whispering. Faith begins to weaken. But prayer was never designed to be a shopping list. Prayer is far more than presenting God with a list of needs and hoping He fulfills every request. While there is nothing wrong with bringing your desires, struggles, and dreams before Him, true prayer begins with faith rather than demands. Faith changes the entire atmosphere of prayer because it shifts the focus away from what you lack and places it on who God is. Many people approach prayer with anxious hearts, believing that repeating the same request over and over will somehow convince God to act. Yet faith reminds us that God already knows our needs before we speak them. He understands every burden we carry, every fear we hide, and every hope we cherish. When you pray with faith, you are not trying to inform God about your situation. You are expressing your trust in His wisdom, His timing, and His unfailing love. This kind of prayer creates peace long before circumstances begin to change, because confidence in God's character becomes greater than concern over temporary problems. Faith-filled prayer also transforms the way you see challenges. Instead of allowing difficulties to convince you that God has abandoned you, faith reminds you that He is present even in the darkest seasons. Every obstacle becomes an opportunity to witness His faithfulness in a new way. The person who prays with faith does not deny reality or pretend that pain does not exist. Instead, they acknowledge their struggles while believing that God is greater than every obstacle standing before them. This perspective brings strength during moments when answers seem delayed and hope feels distant. Faith teaches you that silence does not always mean absence. Sometimes God is working behind the scenes, preparing circumstances, shaping your character, or protecting you from outcomes you cannot yet understand. Waiting becomes easier when your confidence rests in the One who holds the future rather than in your ability to control every detail of life. Praying with faith also means surrendering the outcome instead of insisting on your own plan. Many people unknowingly place conditions on their trust, believing they will continue to have faith only if God answers exactly as they expect. Genuine faith refuses to make God's love dependent upon favorable circumstances. It believes that His wisdom is higher than human understanding, and that His decisions are always rooted in perfect love. There are moments when the answer is yes, moments when the answer is no, and moments when the answer is wait. Each response carries purpose, even when it is difficult to understand. Faith accepts that God's perspective reaches beyond the present moment, seeing consequences and blessings that remain hidden from human eyes. Trust grows stronger when you realize that unanswered prayers are not always signs of rejection, but can become evidence of divine protection and preparation. Another important aspect of faith-filled prayer is gratitude. A grateful heart remembers past victories and recognizes the countless blessings already received. Instead of focusing entirely on what has not yet happened, Gratitude celebrates the ways God has already provided guidance, comfort, strength, forgiveness, and daily provision. This attitude changes the tone of prayer completely. Complaints begin to fade as thankfulness fills the heart. Gratitude strengthens faith because it reminds you that the same God who was faithful yesterday remains faithful today. Every answered prayer from the past becomes a testimony that encourages confidence for the future. Even during difficult seasons, gratitude allows you to recognize God's presence in small moments of peace, unexpected kindness, and quiet strength that often go unnoticed. Faith also requires consistency. It is easy to pray when life is comfortable, but true faith continues praying when answers seem delayed. Persistent prayer is not about trying to persuade God through repetition. Instead, it reflects unwavering trust that refuses to give up regardless of circumstances. Every prayer offered in faith builds spiritual endurance. Over time, your relationship with God becomes deeper because prayer is no longer limited to emergencies. It becomes part of everyday life. You begin speaking with Him throughout the day, seeking His guidance before making decisions, thanking Him during joyful moments, and relying on His strength during difficult ones. Prayer evolves from a religious obligation into an ongoing conversation rooted in love and dependence. Praying with faith also changes your expectations. Rather than expecting God to remove every hardship immediately, you begin expecting Him to provide the strength needed to overcome whatever comes your way. This shift creates resilience because your confidence no longer depends upon perfect circumstances. Instead, it rests in God's unchanging presence. Even when challenges remain, your heart experiences peace because faith assures you that you never face those challenges alone. God's presence becomes more valuable than immediate solutions, and His peace becomes greater than temporary relief. You discover that His greatest gift is often not changing your situation instantly but transforming your heart while you walk through it. As faith continues to grow, prayer becomes less about receiving blessings and more about knowing the one who gives them. Your greatest desire shifts from asking God to fulfill every personal wish to seeking His will above your own. This deeper relationship brings freedom because your security no longer depends on external success, financial prosperity, or favorable circumstances. It rests completely in God's unchanging character and faithful promises. When faith becomes the foundation of every prayer, fear gradually loses its grip, anxiety gives way to confidence, and hope remains alive even when answers take longer than expected because you know that the God who hears every sincere prayer is always working for your good according to His perfect wisdom and everlasting love. God's will is always greater than human understanding, yet many people spend their lives trying to persuade Him to approve their own plans instead of seeking His perfect direction. Prayer was never meant to be a way of convincing God to follow our desires. It was designed to align our hearts with His purpose. When we seek God's will above our own, we acknowledge that His wisdom reaches far beyond our limited perspective. We see only the present moment, but God sees the beginning, the middle, and the end of every situation. He understands the opportunities that will strengthen us, the trials that will refine us, and the blessings that will arrive at exactly the right time. Trusting His will requires humility because it means admitting that our knowledge is incomplete while His understanding is perfect. This surrender is not a sign of weakness, but an act of deep faith that places confidence in the one who has never failed. Many people enter prayer with a fixed outcome already decided in their minds. They know exactly what they want, when they want it, and how they expect God to accomplish it. When events unfold differently, disappointment often replaces peace. Yet seeking God's will changes the entire purpose of prayer. Instead of asking God to bless every decision we have already made, we begin asking Him to guide every decision before we make it. This shift transforms prayer from a conversation centered on personal ambition into one focused on divine direction. Rather than demanding open doors, we ask God to open only the doors that lead to His purpose and to close every path that would pull us away from His best. Such prayers demonstrate trust because they leave room for God to work in ways we never imagined. Seeking God's will also requires patience. Modern life encourages instant results, immediate answers, and quick solutions. But God's timing often unfolds differently. There are seasons when prayers seem unanswered, not because God has forgotten us, but because He is preparing us for what lies ahead. A blessing received before we are ready can become a burden instead of a gift. God often develops our character before He changes our circumstances. During seasons of waiting, He teaches perseverance, humility, dependence, and faith. These qualities cannot be developed overnight. They grow through consistent trust and daily obedience. Waiting becomes less frustrating when we understand that God is never wasting time. Every delay has purpose. Every season carries lessons, and every step is leading towards something greater than we can currently see. One of the greatest examples of seeking God's will is choosing obedience, even when it is difficult. There are moments when God's direction challenges our comfort, stretches our faith, or requires us to let go of opportunities we desperately wanted. In those moments, obedience becomes a powerful expression of trust. It declares that God's wisdom is more reliable than our emotions and that His plans are more valuable than temporary satisfaction. Obedience does not always produce immediate rewards, but it always leads to lasting spiritual growth. Every faithful step strengthens your relationship with God and deepens your confidence in His leadership. As you continue following His guidance, you begin to recognize His faithfulness in ways that would have been impossible if you had insisted on your own path. Seeking God's will also changes the way we measure success. The world often defines success through wealth, recognition, influence, and achievement, but God's definition reaches much deeper. True success is living faithfully according to His purpose, regardless of how others measure your accomplishments. A life surrendered to God's will may not always appear impressive by worldly standards, but it carries eternal significance. When your primary goal becomes pleasing God rather than impressing people, comparison loses its power. You no longer feel pressured to chase every opportunity or compete with everyone around you. Instead, you find contentment in knowing that God has prepared a unique calling specifically for your life. This confidence frees you from anxiety because your identity is rooted in His purpose rather than public approval. Another important part of seeking God's will is remaining sensitive to His guidance. God often directs His people through Scripture, wise counsel, inner conviction, and circumstances that align with His truth. This requires a listening heart. Prayer should never be a one-sided conversation where we speak constantly without making room for God to lead us. Moments of quiet reflection become just as valuable as spoken words. In those quiet moments, clarity often replaces confusion. God gently shapes our desires until they begin reflecting His own. Over time, we discover that seeking His will is not about losing our dreams, but allowing Him to refine them into something far greater than we originally imagined. Trusting God's will also brings peace during uncertainty. Life is filled with unexpected changes, unanswered questions, and circumstances beyond our control. Trying to manage every detail creates stress and fear, but surrendering those concerns to God brings freedom. Peace is not found in knowing every answer. It is found in knowing the One who holds every answer. Even when the road ahead remains unclear, Confidence grows because God's character never changes. His faithfulness remains constant through every season of life. Every challenge becomes an opportunity to depend more fully on Him, and every victory becomes a reminder of His goodness. This confidence allows believers to move forward with courage even when the future remains uncertain. As your heart becomes increasingly focused on God's will, your prayers begin to change naturally. Instead of asking only for comfort, you begin asking for courage. Instead of seeking only success, you ask for faithfulness. Instead of demanding immediate answers, you seek deeper understanding and greater trust. Your greatest desire becomes knowing God more intimately and reflecting His love in every area of life. This transformation is one of the greatest blessings of prayer because it shifts your attention away from temporary desires and toward eternal purpose. When God's will becomes your highest priority, every decision is shaped by wisdom, every challenge becomes an opportunity for growth, and every season of life carries meaning because you know that the Lord who guides your steps is always leading you according to His perfect plan, unfailing love, and everlasting purpose.